But first, breaking tonight, multiple sources tell Fox the U.S. and Israel are getting help tonight in their offensive against Iran. Thousands of Kurds are launching a ground offensive inside Iran. Meantime, President Trump saying the U.S. is in a very strong position now in its conflict with Iran. He's adding that it seems everyone who wants to lead that country ends up dead. The top U.S. military commander in the Middle East says the American assault has just begun. The U.S. Senate has just rejected a Democratic effort to limit the president's authority to attack Iran. A U.S. submarine today sank an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean, the first time that's happened since World War II. Iran is warning of the destruction of the Middle East's military and economic infrastructure. Turkey, meantime, says NATO defenses intercepted a ballistic missile launched from Iran before it entered Turkey's airspace. And U.S. authorities are working to get Americans out of the Middle East every day, while American troops are getting an assist from a key ally. Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin begins our coverage tonight. Good evening, Jen.
Good evening, Brett. A senior U.S. official tells Fox that thousands of Kurds have crossed from Iraq into Iran to launch a ground offensive. Their goal, to give the Iranian people the confidence to rise up. These are Kurdish Iranian militias entering from Iraq. According to U.S. Central Command, in its first 24 hours, the U.S. military operation was twice the scale of shock and awe at the start of the Iraq War. An American submarine hunted and sank an Iranian frigate, the Iris Dina, in the Indian Ocean.
For the first time since 1945, a United States Navy fast attack submarine has sunk an enemy combatant ship using a single Mark 48 torpedo to achieve immediate effect, sending the warship to the bottom of the sea.
Separately, the U.S. military sank one of Iran's newest prized Navy vessels, a corvette named after Qasem Soleimani, the general who headed the IRGC Quds Force, who President Trump ordered killed during his first term. Sri Lanka rescued 32 survivors from the Iris Dina. 80 others on board were killed.
This war of aggression is not our choice. It is the war of choice for the U.S. government and the Israeli regime.
For the first time in combat, the U.S. military fired long-range precision-guided munitions. And now that it's destroyed Iran's air defenses, the Pentagon will move away from standoff weapons like Tomahawk cruise missiles, glide bombs, and drones, which fire lighter payloads. The U.S. can now begin using stand-in weapons like those carried by the B-52 bombers, which have to be right over their target to drop heavier munitions, 500, 1,000, and 2,000-pound bombs. CENTCOM says the number of Iranian ballistic missiles fired are down 86% from the first day, and one-way attack drones are down 73%.
Sure, Iran will still be able to shoot some missiles and still be able to launch one-way attack drones at civilian targets. And their proxies will attempt to attack our embassies, bases, and soft targets. We will find them, and we will kill them.
Today at the White House, Caroline Leavitt was asked about the administration arming the Kurds to inspire a popular uprising in Iran. Her response, quote, "Any report suggesting the president has agreed to any such plan is completely false and should not be written." Kurdish leaders in Iraq have denied that any Iraqi Kurds have crossed the border. Brett?
All right, we'll follow that, Jen. Thank you.
This decision to launch this operation was based on a cumulative effect of various direct threats that Iran posed to the United States of America, and the president's feeling based on fact that Iran does pose an imminent and direct threat.
I've said repeatedly since the first briefing over 10 days ago, there was no imminent threat to the United States that I believe would constitute putting our sailors and soldiers in harm's way.
Well, was Iran a threat to the U.S. or not? Joining us tonight to talk about this and the situation in the Middle East is former Secretary of State, former National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. Secretary Rice, thanks for being here. You know, we have these polls out about Iran, national security threat. You know, most people who answer these polls, it's 61% yes, 38% no. This is the banter back and forth, even as obviously the military operation is being characterized as being very successful, and we have markers on that. What's your thoughts about where we are right now and where we may be headed?
Well, the most important thing, Brett, and thank you for having me, but the most important thing is to recognize that Iran has been at war with us for at least 47 years, all the way from 1979. People may forget they took our embassy hostage 444 days. They were responsible for the killings of 300 plus Marines in Lebanon in the early 1980s. If you ask people about Iraq, what was the source of many of our casualties in Iraq, you'll get estimates as high as 75 or 80% of them were due to Iranian-made roadside bombs. And so they've been at war for us a long time. They also have developed the military capability to have reach outside of the boundaries of Iran, including Hezbollah and Hamas, which they both arm and equip and continue to arm and equip even after the events of the summer. And I myself negotiated 4 Security Council resolutions calling them a threat to international peace and security under Chapter 7, the strongest chapter of the UN Security Council resolutions, because of their nuclear ambitions. So to say that this regime was not a threat, I think is simply not, it's ahistorical. They have been a threat for a long time.
You know, you can praise the military's action, its effectiveness, how precise it is, the amazing things we're seeing every day of the U.S. military and the Israeli military, for that matter, while still raising questions about how long is this going to last? Is it worth the blood and treasure that we're doing currently? You know, another poll, the handling of Iran, does it make us safer, less safe, no difference? Less safe is at 51%. So there is this skittishness or skepticism out there, even if you're wholeheartedly supporting what the military is doing every day.
Well, because there is uncertainty with any military operation and what the aftermath might be. But I think if the goal of the administration is to render Iran incapable of using its military forces outside of its borders, of threatening our neighbors, our allies, of threatening our bases abroad, which we're seeing they are capable of doing. If it is trying to deny them a conventional umbrella for their nuclear ambitions, that is a worthy goal. Now, what comes after? People are, of course, concerned about that. But if you can render Iran essentially incapable of military action against us and against our allies, that's worthy. And I think what they're trying to do is to neuter Iran as a military power in the region. And by the way, the Iranians, who I think made a strategic blunder in attacking the Gulf states like the UAE or Kuwait or others, is demonstrating that it is its goal to be a destabilizing force in the Middle East. Yes, you can still be concerned about what may come after. You can still be concerned about the uncertainties of warfare, but to render this awful regime incapable of using its military power, that's a worthy goal.
There's, talk about not restricting what the military may or may not do going forward. You've obviously been through this with wars as National Security Advisor, as Secretary of State, the mission creep fear. Now there's talk and reports about the Kurds possibly arming the Iranian Kurds and being a force on the ground. Your thoughts about that, knowing all you know about that region?
Well, the one thing I don't know is the nature of these reports that we're hearing about Kurdish incursions, if you will, into Iranian territory. And we probably ought to be circumspect about making judgments about what that really means in terms of Kurdish activity. Is it independent Kurdish activity? Is it somehow coordinated Kurdish activity? We'll learn those things later. But it does speak to the complicated demographics of Iran, and we have to keep that in mind. The Iranian population includes a large Azeri population. It includes a large Kurdish population. Those populations have been all the Iranian people have been badly treated by their regime, but there have been a lot of suppressions of those ethnic groups. So we do have to be aware that Iran is not a homogeneous population. It's also a population of over 90 million people on territory that's twice the size of Texas. So it's going to be a complicated set of circumstances here as we go forward.
Last thing, you've been in the halls of power, in the meetings behind closed doors. Talk about this decision by a commander-in-chief to do what President Trump has done and what that means big picture in the world looking at it.
Well, I think you have to see this as a series, really, of events, starting with October 7th, when Iran demonstrated that it probably wasn't possible to deter their tentacles like Hamas. I'm quite certain that October 7th and Hamas could not have happened without Iranian training and equipment, maybe even planning. And then, of course, you had the events of June when the administration decided, along with the Israelis, to try and at least degrade and maybe even seriously set back Iranian nuclear capabilities. In order to do that, they were able to suppress Iranian air defenses. And so Iran is in a sense, defenseless then. And then you see that the Iranians are rebuilding their nuclear capability, that they're rearming Hamas and Hezbollah, and that they are essentially at this moment defenseless. They won't always be defenseless. And so the decision is to really at this point take care of it and render them incapable of those activities. So I see it as a series of decisions. I do think that
bold
it's
ones.
Big ones, but a worthy goal. Of course, we'll have to watch and see, but I do think that the question of making sure that you don't get mission creep is an important one. Taking care of Iranian military operations, military capabilities is very important. The other thing that this does do is it, particularly if you can do something about the security forces in Iran, maybe it opens the possibilities for the Iranian people themselves to try to determine their own future. But we're a long way from that.
Madam Secretary, we really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Brett. Great to be with you.
Up next, the Senate votes on a resolution to limit President Trump's war powers with Iran. And then Minnesota's governor and attorney general address allegations of massive fraud in their state.
All right, we are back, and you can see that President Trump is now seated at this roundtable that's covering artificial intelligence, AI, and affordable energy around all of this. A lot of big tech executives there. The president has said they are going to pay for the expansion, but he's talking about Iran right now. Let's listen in.
And if we didn't terminate the worst deal, one of the worst deals ever made, the Obama nuclear deal, I call it the Obama nuclear deal, where he gave everything to Iran, including a nuclear weapon. It was a road to a nuclear weapon. Bad things would have happened 4 years ago, because they would have had a weapon 4 years ago if I didn't terminate that deal. So we're in a very strong position now, and their leadership is just rapidly going. Everybody that seems to want to be a leader, they end up dead. And it's an amazing thing that's taking place before your eyes, because for 47 years, we were pushed around, and we shouldn't have been. And I think I can say, and you see it as well as I do, you see the tremendous progress that's being made. Their missiles are being wiped out rapidly. Their launchers are being wiped out. They're attacking their neighbors. They're attacking their, in some cases, allies, or not so long ago, allies. And, you know, it's really a nation that was out of control, and they would have used it on us if we let them, if we waited any longer. A big factor was Soleimani, the killing of Soleimani in my first term. And maybe the biggest factor was the rebuilding of the military in my first term. And then the B-2s hit the, and I use the word obliterate because it really was, it was a complete obliteration of their nuclear potential. And that set them back very, very seriously. If we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon. If we didn't do the B-2 attack a number of months ago, they would have a nuclear weapon. And when crazy people have nuclear weapons, bad things happen. So we're in very good shape now. I want to let you know that, and we will continue forward. But it's a great display of military strength, and I'm very proud to have, with some of the people in the room, both senators and congressmen, we rebuilt, and women, we rebuilt our military during the first term, and we're using it a little bit more than I thought we would have to. Venezuela worked out really great. We have a wonderful relationship with the president and the various representatives, and we're taking out hundreds of millions of barrels of oil, and that goes to our benefit and to Venezuela's benefit. They'll be doing better than they've ever done before, and we will get a big piece of that, and we'll also make life wonderful for the people of Venezuela who have been very, very badly hit. So that's a lot said in a short period of time, but you can witness it for yourself.
Jackie.
Thank you, Caroline. Obviously, seen the update from the State Department on the 17,500 Americans that have already come back, including some 8,000 just yesterday. There are still 6,000 that are looking to get out, as I understand it. And just in the context of what you just told Garrett about the president's decision on a timeline, if he had decided to do this strike before receiving, the specific intelligence about the meeting on Saturday, should there have been more done in advance of the strikes to try to get those Americans in the region resources and information to get home before day 3 of the war?
There was many signs put out by the State Department, and I wish that everyone in this room would report on them. The Secretary of State issued level 4 travel advisories dating back to January for many of these countries in the region. On January 14th, the U.S. mission to Saudi Arabia advised personnel and Americans to exercise increased caution and limit non-essential travel to any military installations. On February 11th, the U.S. Department of State Consular Affairs shared a list of countries with level 4 do not travel advisories. You can't be much more clear than that. Do not travel to these following countries. On February 23rd, the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon ordered non-emergency government personnel and family members to leave Lebanon due to safety risks, and we helped them do that. On March 2nd, the State Department urged U.S. citizens to depart Lebanon immediately. With respect to Iran, on February 27th, the Secretary designated Iran as a state of sponsor of wrongful detention and stated no American should travel to Iran for any reason. And again, on February 27th, the U.S. ambassador to Israel warned Americans to leave Iran, and they provided travel advisory alerts through the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. So the State Department was all hands on deck on advising extreme caution and do not travel alerts to Americans in the region. With respect to the Americans who are still in the region now, again, the State Department is asking that they register at the website so they can directly identify you, and we are actively and rapidly working to charter flights. There is some commercial flights that are taking off intermittently from these countries, and we plan to get Americans on board as quickly as possible, again, free of charge to them. And we have some additional measures that I think will be announced in the coming days. Again, I can also reiterate from the president's perspective, this is something he's brought up directly with our allies and partners in the region, that we expect their help in getting Americans home, and we will do that, and we will not rest until every single American is returned home safely.
Thank you. And then one follow-up just on how people might be experiencing this at home. With respect to the economy and the cost of oil spiking, is there a need to start those Navy escorts in the Strait of Hormuz now to sort of blunt the impact to people? And also, because Spain is a member of the EU, does that at all put a wrinkle in the president's plan for a trade embargo with them?
With respect to Spain, I think they heard the president's message yesterday loud and clear. And it's my understanding over the past several hours they've agreed to cooperate with the U.S. military. And so I know that the U.S. military is coordinating with their counterparts in Spain. But the president expects all of our European allies, of course, to cooperate in this long sought-after mission, not just for the United States, but also for Europe, to crush the rogue Iranian regime that, again, not only threatens America, but also threatens our European allies as well. With respect to oil prices and the economy here at home, of course, this is something that Secretary Bessent, Secretary Wright, the National Economic Council of Energy, that is led by Secretary Burgum, has been long working on and well in advance. Yesterday, President Trump announced the U.S. Development Finance Corporation will provide political risk insurance at a very reasonable price for crude carriers and cargo ships operating in and around the Gulf. And as you you pointed out, Jackie, the president said if necessary and when appropriate, the U.S. Navy will begin escorting tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. I think it speaks to why this action was so necessary, that ultimately the energy industry is going to benefit from the president's actions with respect to Iran because Iran will no longer be controlling the Strait of Hormuz and restricting the free flow of energy, which, as you all know, controls 20% of the world's global oil supply.
State Mike Pompeo, he's joining us live. Mr. Secretary, welcome to you. You've been listening to the briefing there and the update from the White House. As we do anticipate, we'll be hearing from President Trump shortly. Your thoughts on what you just heard and what this means for this going forward?
Well, Senator John, it's great to be with you. Look, I think she laid out precisely three things that are important. One, the reason for the president's efforts in Iran, right? 47 years of Iran being at war with us. Second, she talked about the reason for the timing of this. Why now? And then finally, she answered that important question about, like, could President Trump have just kicked the can down the road in the same way that so many previous presidents had? And that was just unacceptable risk to the United States of America for him to have done that. So he's done the right thing. She spoke about the successes to date. No one's saying victory is at hand, but they've talked about the enormous successes in the opening half a dozen days of this conflict. The Iranian regime is weaker today than it was 5 days ago. Moreover, the American people are far safer than they were 5 days ago.
Mr. Secretary, though it's not a stated goal of this administration, the president has talked about the benefits of regime change, I guess, in Iran. But the question is, what does that look like? There's talk that Khamenei's son may become the next Ayatollah unless there is some sort of popular revolt within Iran. And if there is, what comes next?
Well, look, as for that particular individual, he's got blood on his hands as well. That seems a very difficult person for the West to have swallowed once we've done all this hard work. I think the Israelis would likely share that same view. And as for others, what the United States is going to demand, no matter who ends up in charge, is that they behave like a normal nation, right? That's all we've ever asked of them. Don't build nuclear weapons. Don't threaten Israel with ballistic missiles. Don't now attack your Muslim brothers in the Gulf Arab states. Don't run a terror campaign all throughout the Middle East, in Syria and in Lebanon and Iraq and in Yemen. Those are the things we're going to ask of the next set of leaders. The Iranian people will ultimately get to sort that out. The IRGC, right there, force that owns about a fifth of the Iranian economy will have something to say about this. They're not going to go quietly into the night. But the pounding that they have already taken and the pounding that I expect that they will take in the days ahead will greatly diminish their capacity not only to terrorize the world, but their own citizens inside of their country.
On chartering these flights and getting those Americans that may be in harm's way out, Caroline Levitt just said this. SOT3 from our bank, guys.
And we are actively and rapidly working to charter flights. There is some commercial flights that are taking off intermittently from these countries, and we plan to get Americans on board as quickly as possible, again, free of charge to them. And we have some additional measures that I think will be announced in the coming days.
What is your assessment how this is going?
Look, these are difficult things. I remember when COVID hit. Senator, you'll remember this too. We had to evacuate hundreds of thousands of people when the world was shut down. Commercial air wasn't happening. It was even hard to move vehicles in many countries. So this will be a difficult undertaking. I think the administration is serious about this. They've been thoughtful. They're going to marshal the resources. But you have to get these folks to a place where they can actually go to an airport where that is safe and then find enough seats, enough capacity to actually get them home. Secretary Rubio, I'm sure, will be leading this charge. And I'm confident in the days and weeks ahead, the volume of people that can come back who choose to. I've talked to Americans in the region who think, you know, it's pretty damn safe here, actually, in Abu Dhabi or in Riyadh. They're not worried and not anxious to get home. But those who want to come home, I'm confident the United States government will do everything they can to assist them in getting out of what they view as harm's way.
Yeah, we pointed out a short time ago that Admiral Robert Harward, retired, is in Abu Dhabi. He was playing golf this morning as he appeared with Harris Faulkner.
I know Admiral Harwood pretty well. That doesn't surprise me. I'll bet he didn't hit a straight one, though.
Well, he didn't seem to think that a golf course was high on the priority list of targets for Iran. I want to come back to this idea, Mr. Secretary, of what happens after the bombs stop falling. Because you can take away Iran's ballistic missile program. You can take away their potential for making a nuclear weapon, at least in the interim. You can maybe even stop their malign support for proxies throughout the Middle East. But if you don't change the regime, I mean, aren't we just going to be back here in 5 years or a decade doing this again?
John, that could well be true. Sometimes you just take down risk for the moment, right? If we got 5 or 10 years of stability and peace from Iran, that'd be a major accomplishment for sure. Second, we shouldn't diminish that the regime has already changed. Everyone says, is the regime going to change? Make no mistake about it. The theocracy that was in control of Iran for the last 47 years is no more. That the change has already occurred. Now we need to sort through what that's going to look like. Some of that we can influence and impact, and some of it will ultimately be up to the Iranian people. But I'll remind you, John, this isn't just about Iran either. It's about the Gulf Arab states, Israel's right to exist, peace in the region, and the Chinese Communist Party and the Russian influence in the region almost all flowed through Iran. I promise you, no one's going to start to pick the Chinese and the Russians as their defense partners after they've seen the U.S. decimate Chinese and Russian equipment, technology, and structure for their military. The Chinese Communist Party has been diminished as well, and President Trump should get all the credit that's so much deserved for having done that. More work to do, but a lot already accomplished.
Secretary Pompeo, appreciate your time today, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Sandra.
All
Great
right.
to be
Thanks,
with you
Mr.
both.
Secretary. We'll see you again soon.
Our next guest flew F-22s. Retired U.S. Marine Corps officer and Top Gun instructor Dave Burke joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good
Thanks
morning.
for having me back.
Thank you for coming on again. Thank you, first of all, for your service. Tell us about this mission. How are we accomplishing this?
Well, listen, I'm learning a lot as we go, as you see, but it is so clear to me that what you have right now is the full array of capability, trained, equipped, in place, with a recent history of being successful and a ton of confidence that the equipment we have can do exactly what it needs to do. And that's what's playing out. It is plain as day that that's what's playing out.
You know, David, can you speak to the soldier right now? What's going through their minds? Because, you know, there's a lot of chatter online about the families. Obviously, you know, all of us have talked about, we're praying for our troops, the men and women that's doing this job to protect our country. What's going through their mind right now with an operation like this?
I love that question. Listen, none of us in the military, former and current, want war. We don't want to go to war. In fact, we want to avoid it. But if we get to a position where that is our only option, the best thing we can do for our men and women in uniform is give them not just the training, not just the equipment, but the support and the confidence and the belief. So I think what you have right now is people in uniform knowing that we support them and believe in them, and they're in a position to do their jobs and be successful. That breeds a ton of confidence.
So we're looking at an operation now depending heavily on the air. This is going to be an air campaign. This is not Iraq. There's no ground component. When you have the USS Ford, you have all the naval assets in the area. You have 40,000 there. How do you coordinate the skies with another nation?
Yeah, this is a massive logistical effort, and you're bringing to bear the most capable aircraft in the world in the history of combat. And to be able to do it with our closest allies, who also, as you mentioned earlier, bring the most capable aircraft to bear, that's a ton of work, that's a ton of training, but this is a logistical and support effort that's been built over time. We're not just figuring this out today. This has been planned and coordinated, and the interaction between us, Israel, and our air forces, right now it looks like it's pretty seamless, and that's built on all the work that's been done to get us to this point.
You know, Dave, I remember with Operation Midnight Hammer, which was last June, the president, remember he came out and he released those images and we saw the actual strikes on the nuclear facility with the B-2 bombers. Will we see that? Will we have something similar to that? Because what we're seeing now is this.
Not much.
Yeah, exactly. We're not seeing much. When will we see the results from what our military did today?
Yeah, I think you will see that over time. Just about every strike we conduct, we are using precise GPS, laser-guided, very accurate weapons, and we get a lot of what we call BDA, Battle Damage Assessment. We get real-time feedback. I'm sure right now in the very early stages, they're going through that, but eventually I think that's going to be released. And just like we saw last summer, and Brian and I talked about that in great detail as it happened, you're going to see the visual feedback of what we're doing, and I think we're going to get a lot of that on display.
Former CIA director and former CENTCOM commander, retired General David Petraeus, who actually co-authored the surge strategy, which was so successful in Iraq, and he saw the Iranian damage up close and personal to many people that he knew. General, your assessment of what we just learned from the Secretary of War and Chairman and Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Well, I think this confirms that there is very good progress against all the different target sets. You just enumerated them again, but certainly the missile capabilities, the drone capabilities, the Navy, any residual nuclear capabilities, and of course the leadership across the board, starting with the Supreme Leader and continuing even apparently the assembly of experts that we're gathering to pick the next Supreme Leader. And then trying to set conditions if there is a force within Iran that breaks off from the regime or enters. You heard some discussion of the Syrian Kurds and so forth that could actually topple the regime. That's not something in general that is possible from the air. And so I think the president has been very careful after the initial conversation that he had with the American public to establish that we are setting the conditions for that. It's going to have to be those on the ground who take advantage of that. I will say that I'm sure that Central Command, which I was privileged to command as well, of course, is very focused on the so-called missile and drone math, but particularly the missile math. Again, how many missiles do they have left? How many launchers, which is even more critical because that's what puts them in the sky, going after the future capability, the manufacturing facilities, and then how many of the high-end interceptors do we have together with our Gulf state allies, partners, and we're talking not just ground, but also all those on the ships in the Gulf, outside it, in the Mediterranean, and integrated with all the Gulf states, and also, of course, with Israel and their very comprehensive layered defense system.
So, General, we're learning more about the operation, and there's some reporting that talks about that the president got a call from the prime minister on last Monday about the coordinates of this meeting that they were able to take out, the Israelis. And that's when the president greenlit this mission. The combination of the threat, obviously, that they laid out in that press conference, do you agree with the president and the Defense Department that that was the right move to make, considering they had that one shot to take them all out at one time?
Yeah, let me describe the dynamics here. A short answer is yes, but let me describe the dynamics. A lot of us felt that Israel was going to strike Iran again within a month or two because of concern about the reconstitution of the missile stocks, which, despite the great Israeli and American defenses, still 5 to 7% of those got through in the 12-day war. I was just in Tel Aviv a few weeks ago. I saw the damage. They're still rebuilding from some of that. So that was a factor. There was also a sense in the U.S. that the nuclear talks, that the Iranians were just stringing us along. That got very frustrating. And then you get this exquisite intelligence and an opportunity to achieve at least tactical surprise. I think a lot of us felt that there was going to be something. I'm sure the Iranians did too. And the stunning miscalculation and arrogance of the Supreme Leader, seeing that we hadn't attacked in the early hours of the morning, which is when we do normally conduct these operations, they decide to gather in daylight, and that exquisite intelligence enabled the forces to take him out. And a number of other leaders in that meeting, and then also others across the board in the senior ranks of the Defense Ministry, the minister, their chairman of the Joint Chiefs equivalent, the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, and so forth and so on. And that has continued, as has the effort. Again, we're talking about probably 4,000 total targets now between the Israelis and the Americans. And what we're doing now, because of the achievement of, at very least, air superiority, if not air supremacy, essentially the Iranians are defenseless at this point against air attack and missile attack, as long as you stay above a certain altitude. So now it's not just the B-2 bombers that have been deployed. It's now the B-1s and the B-52s. This is the real heavyweight stuff, carry enormous bomb loads, very precise. And they're now able to get into this fight as well.
Go ahead. General, we had heard about targeting the ballistic missile sites, that we weren't able to target those unless they were firing off missiles, and then we knew from where they were coming. Do we have more intelligence on that so that we can make sure we get all their ballistic missile sites and we don't have to keep going back in?
Well, I'm sure that we have knowledge about where the actual stocks are located. We have knowledge about the likely launch sites. We certainly know where the manufacturing facilities are, and we have very persistent intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets to enable us to identify activities that could indicate that there's going to be a launch. And this is really the focus of this campaign right now. I would say probably the main effort, because We want to dramatically reduce their ability to launch missiles and also drones, given the impact that they can have. The Emiratis in particular have done spectacularly well against all of this. They invested not just high-end missile defense, but also in short-range air defense. So you're not sending a $2 million missile to take down a $20,000 drone. Nonetheless, there's still a couple of dozen that have gotten through, and we've seen what that has done. The Fairmont Hotel in flames, a port damaged very heavily, airport, all the rest of this. So that's really the main effort, I suspect, right now, along with ensuring that the naval capabilities are taken down very dramatically as well. And that is definitely happening at the same time.
General Petraeus, thanks so much. Thanks for the incident analysis on the ongoing fight in Iran. General David Petraeus, thanks.
The State Department is now actively, as it has been now for the last 72 hours, implementing our plans to help Americans in the Middle East be able to depart. As of a few minutes ago, before I left, 9,000 Americans have been able to leave the region since the start of this war.
Well, right now, State Department evacuation flights are underway for Americans stranded in the Middle East. It is a very difficult situation with disrupted commercial travel and widespread airspace closures. Yesterday, a drone strike started a fire near the U.S. consulate in Dubai. No reports of any injuries there. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the United States is securing commercial, charter, and military flights to assist those who are trying to leave. And we are showing you the contact information right now in case you or someone you know needs help. Because a lot of people can watch everything on their phones. We haven't heard that people's phones are out necessarily all over that region. Iran, a different story. Their Ayatollah turned off the internet. Senior foreign policy correspondent Jillian Turner is at the State Department with breaking developments. Jillian.
Harris, thank you for sharing the contact info for Americans stuck abroad. Right now, there are over a dozen American embassies in the Middle East that have been forced to physically close down due to the threat from Iranian militias. But a worrying development this morning we wanted to flag for you. At least one, possibly two of these embassies and consular outposts are now being forced to actually cease operations completely. That means no passports, no visas for Americans overseas. Take a look at this from the American embassy in the UAE. They say due to the current security situation, all routine visa and U.S. citizen service appointments are postponed. We'll contact you to reschedule once services resume. The U.S. consulate in Dubai narrowly escaping enemy fire yesterday. It had been under evacuation orders. Fortunately, at the time, nobody was hurt. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Americans in the region need to make contact with State Department now.
We need to know where you are. We need to have contact information for Americans that need assistance. They have to register with us.
So as you mentioned, State Department evacuation flights are underway, as are evacuation bus rides out of harm's way in some instances. The flights so far today are leaving from the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Bahrain.
We have identified and continue to identify charter flights, military flight options, and expanded commercial flight options, meaning working with the airlines to send bigger airplanes with more seats.
Another U.S. diplomatic outpost to become a direct military target. The U.S. Embassy in Riyadh came under fire yesterday. It was hit by two drones. Harris, this just in right now from the State Department. They are announcing that since the beginning of this operation, Epic Fury, great news, 17,500 Americans have been able to safely return here to the United States. Another good update yesterday, 8,500 Americans returned to U.S. soil, trying to get an exact number on how many of those were evacuated by the State Department. But however they got here, 8,500 and more Americans back here on U.S. soil out of harm's way. Harris?
On that. And moments ago, I was talking with the Vice Admiral Robert Harwood, and he was saying he could see the shift, that Iran is not firing as much and those airports are running. He noted Abu Dhabi, which is where he was. And he could see the commercial flights and some of those evacs that I would imagine are part of that, too. So that is great news. 17,500. I'm marking that now. We are shifting forward. It's been about 106 hours since Operation Epic Fury began at 1:15 a.m. on Saturday. Jillian, thank you.
Fox News Alert, we told you at the top of the hour, big news that thousands of Iraqi Kurds just launched a new ground offensive in Iran. And White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about it today at the briefing.
The Trump administration reportedly is considering arming Kurdish forces in the hopes of inspiring a popular uprising in Iran. Could you comment on that report?
I can comment on the fact that the president has held many calls with partners, allies, and leaders in the region, in the Middle East. He did speak to Kurdish leaders with respect to our base that we have in northern Iraq. But as for any report suggesting that the president has agreed to any such plan is completely false and should not be written.
Joining me here now in Dallas is former Energy Secretary and former Governor of Texas and Air Force veteran, Governor Rick Perry. Governor, it's great to see you as always.
Thanks, Will. Good to be here.
You have spent time in the region as a member of the United States Air Force, and I'm sure you've traveled the region extensively as the Secretary of Energy. What do you make of this latest note about the Iraqi Kurds?
Yeah, it's. I think any distraction is good, and when we talk about distraction, I think any opposition that we can stir up over there to give the Iranians what for is a good strategy, and I think this Kurdish invasion is one of those. Now, it's a big country. As I shared with you earlier, I lived in the region in 1976. I was stationed at Dhahran over in Saudi Arabia for a while. Iran was our friend. We flew over that part of the world into Bandar Abbas, which is right at the Strait of Hormuz, the island that's in there that General Kellogg talked about. Just right across the water there from Bandar Abbas in Iran. But the point is, it's a big country. They're not going to hop in their pickup trucks and drive up and make an impact into Tehran anytime soon. But I think it's a great example of the region having enough. The region coming together and saying, you know what, we've been brutalized and terrorized by these Iranian radicals as long as we're going to take it. And every one of those countries that surround them, I think, there's probably some efforts being made, certainly some efforts being made across the Middle East, I would suggest, to get rid of these people, get a new administration in, get a new regime in that is not radical, crazy, and causing the region great harm.
Yeah, that includes the Iraqi Kurds, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and many other, UAE, who look like they're rallying to the cause against Iran. You heard the general, you brought up to General Kellogg, you heard him bring up as well oil production, oil transport from the region through the Strait of Hormuz. Ultimately, when it comes to Iranian oil going to China, but there's also the oil that's flowing from the Gulf states to the wider global markets, and that raises questions about what that means for us at home when it comes to energy. Now, this has been addressed by Secretary Bessent.
In terms of the energy dominance that President Trump has put forward during this administration, we're in a very, very different position than when the Russians invaded Ukraine. We are at all-time high in production, both for oil and natural gas. We are an exporter to the rest of the world, and U.S. LNG continues to flow around the world.
So he's saying we're well positioned. We're well positioned today because of domestic production.
Correct. And one of the things to keep in mind, he mentioned LNG in there. Qatar, I think 25% of the LNG for the global supply comes right there from the Qataris. So making sure that strait stays open and we're able to move the resources out of there is a really important part of this. There could be discombobulation. I'm not going to say that's not a possibility, but here's what's really important. And President Trump has been really good about sending the message to domestic production to, open the spigots, boys, get out there, get out of their way regulatory-wise, get out of their way from the standpoint of taxation or what have you that could slow down domestic production. American production is what is, I think, key to actually keeping global peace. When I think about, Venezuela, and again, how we manage that, how Venezuela comes back online, what can happen in the Middle East from the standpoint of getting the Iranians out of there and, and getting that production back online, the world can be a substantially more peaceful place with what Donald Trump has started here and moving the U.S. into a position of being able to supply to our allies and, to our competitors for that matter, if they want to, be a good competitor and be a good friend, and you know, we can have a conversation with other countries that historically may have not have been our friends, but if we control the energy supply, they'll be substantially less inclined to not be our friends.
And of course, the price for the average American at the pump, always a paramount.
Indeed.
As you told me, when it comes to the economy, it all comes down to energy.
Everything.
Governor Rick Perry, it's always great to see you.
Will,
Thank you.
good to be with you, man.
The Senate vote that was pushed by Democrats, it's authored by Tim Kaine, Senator Kaine, aimed at potentially halting this operation that you're watching going on and that we heard from the Secretary of War and the Commander of the Joint Chiefs about this morning. So they're talking about it on the floor right now of the United States Senate. Obviously, Senator Warnock from Georgia is who you see on the screen right now. But would this vote actually have any impact is one of the big questions here. Also, keep in mind that while this is now the push of Senate Democrats, you've got the Department of Homeland Security, and we know that there is an increased threat to the homeland because of all of this action that's happening in the Middle East. You've got 19 days of shutdown now for the Department of Homeland Security. TSA workers, 60,000 of them haven't received a full paycheck since February the 4th. So you got to ask yourself, what that does to the safety environment in our nation's airports. Senate Majority Leader John Thune joins me now. Leader Thune, thank you very much. Good to have you with us this afternoon. Give us a sense of, thank you, sir, of what's going on the floor right now. And does this have any teeth? I mean, even if you adhere to the War Powers Act, which has always been controversial, the president would still have 60 days to carry out this action before he would need to go back to Congress, right?
Correct, and that's why this is a political vote, Martha. This is all about the Democrats, again, mainly through their Trump derangement syndrome, blindly, in their blind hatred of the president, just being opposed to anything that he wants to do. I mean, clearly there are Democrats, I believe, who understand that what we're doing in Iran right now makes all the sense in the world from a national security standpoint. But this is an attempt, again, to try to derail or step on the president's messaging around that and create a political issue where there really isn't one. And that's why I'm hopeful we're going to be able to defeat it, because that's really what it is. This is nothing more than political messaging on behalf of the Democrats. This isn't going anywhere. The president's acting well within his authority as the commander-in-chief.
Yeah. We're just a few days into this operation at this point. But here's what Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader on the House side, had to say about these strikes against Iran Watch.
The American people want us to focus on making their life better, making their life more affordable, not getting involved in another endless war in the Middle East that is going to end in failure.
What do you think about that, Senator?
Well, first off, I mean, the Democrats ran up inflation. You're talking about affordability. Let's talk about the highest inflation in 40 years. When Joe Biden was in the White House and the Democrats were running both the House and the Senate here. They were passing massive new spending bills, which flooded the economy with more dollars and drove up inflation. And so all the inflation that we're seeing today as a result of policies that were implemented in that administration and with Democrats in control of the Congress. What the president's doing in Iran is something that, frankly, should have been done probably, arguably a long time ago. But Iran has been building not only its nuclear capability, but its conventional weapons capability to a point that it would have threatened the entire region. And obviously, we have a lot of bases and military personnel in that region of the world, and a lot of allies who would be affected by that, and run by somebody who has said death to Israel, death to America. That's what they believe. They're the biggest exporter of terrorism in the world today. And they are also, they have more American blood on their hands than any nation in the world, if you look at the last 47 years. So this is the president is taking steps to make the world and our country and our people safer.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about Texas and that Senate race, which I know you're watching very closely because it's one of the early sort of tests before we get into the full midterm season. Here's what President Trump just said moments ago on Truth Social. He is essentially calling upon one of them. He said, I will be making my endorsement soon in the Texas Senate race. So just to remind everyone, this is John Cornyn and Ken Paxton who are going up against each other in this race. So the president is going to endorse soon, and he will be asking the candidate that I don't endorse to immediately drop out of this race in capital letters. Your reaction to that, Senator?
I've spoken with the president already today about Texas, and I'm certainly hopeful. I think, as probably you know, Martha, I've made no secret of the fact that I hope the president will endorse John Cornyn. He is an incredibly effective senator for the state of Texas, a strong conservative voice here in the United States Senate, and represents by far our very best hope of making sure that Texas stays red in November in that Senate election. And so we'll see. Ultimately, the president, he makes his own decisions, but I've certainly weighed in many times, I should say, in support of Senator Cornyn, and I believe he is not only going to win the primary, but the general election in November.
Yeah, I was just watching Matt Whitlock, who used to do the Republican Senate committee. He said he believes that an endorsement for Cornyn is coming from the president. You said you just spoke with him. Is it coming shortly, that endorsement from the president?
Well, I'm not going to characterize the conversations I've had with the president, but I think it's fair to say that he's paying a lot of attention, and he knows full well, Megan, how important it is that we hold Texas in Republican column, Republican hands. And so I expect you'll be hearing from him before too long. And I'm not certainly going to get ahead of that, but I'm just very hopeful that the endorsement will be for John Cornyn.
All right, we'll be following that. And I should just mention that we're going to be speaking with Texas Senator John Cornyn tomorrow on this program. And obviously, this is something that's going to be watched very closely. Just very quickly, Leader, yesterday you were with Tim Scott and Senator Capito talking about this housing plan, and I think it's one of the pieces of the economy that is a little bit unanswered, even after the State of the Union, in terms of what kind of policy programs might be put forth to help people get houses, other than lower mortgage rates, which obviously the president would like to see. What is this going to look like?
Well, first off, it is. Mortgage rates, interest rates are a big part of that, and the president is very passionate about driving down the cost of housing in this country, and particularly you talk about a lot of younger Americans, Martha. This is their opportunity to pursue the American dream, to own their own home, and we want to make it easier, not harder, and less expensive, not more expensive. So the housing bill, and we just had a procedural vote to get on it here in the Senate, got 90 votes in the United States Senate. That's very, very rare.
Yeah, it sure is.
But it will complement the things. The president said some things in his State of the Union speech about restrictions on institutional investors' ownership of, single-family houses, that sort of thing. And so there will be things like that included in there that are reforms. It will get rid and cut a lot of the red tape associated with some of these housing programs in this country and increase the supply of housing. Those are the things, but we want to do it in a way that encourages private investment, not more government. And the nice thing about this is it doesn't cost a thing. It doesn't have a score associated with it. These are just changes that will increase supply, reduce red tape, and make, I think, important reforms that should make it more affordable for people to own homes in this country. That's what it's all about. And the president's very focused on the issue of affordability, as are we, and we're actually doing something about it, unlike the Democrats, who just ran up more government spending and continued to pile up 40-year historic inflation when they had the majorities.
So we're just about a minute or so away from President Trump in the Oval Office, Senator. So I do want to ask you one more question. It has to do with what your sense is of the American public's response to this Operation Epic Fury. I don't really want to look at the polls quite yet on this. I think it's only a few days in, and I think people are still kind of figuring out what they think about this. But are you concerned about how long it will go on? We heard Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, say it looks like, I think he said somewhere around a max of 8 weeks.
Right, and I think, that clearly the American people's patience and tolerance for long wars isn't great. But I think what they are doing there is achieving the objectives that they set out to achieve, and that is to diminish the capability of Iran to threaten the entire region and the world with nuclear and conventional weapons, to diminish their naval capacity in that region. And ultimately, I would love to see a leadership change there, Martha. I think a regime change is a worthwhile objective. That's not something I think that's part of the president or our Defense Department or the State Department's objectives here. But I think right now it's about achieving our military objectives, and it's very clear. Those have been identified by the president and his team, and I think the folks in the region are making significant headway in accomplishing that objective. And we want to make sure that we continue to support them and continue to pray for our men and women in uniform, and particularly those families who have lost loved ones.
Absolutely. We just learned their identities for them, and we're going to show their pictures and honor them in a little bit. Thank you very much, Senator and Majority Leader John Thune of South Dakota. Thank you, sir.
Starting last night and to be completed in a few days, in under a week, the two most powerful air forces in the world will have complete control of Iranian skies, uncontested airspace. I hope all the folks watching understand what uncontested airspace and complete control means.
What does uncontested airspace and complete control mean? Well, we can have that question answered, and we can address the big news of the day, that thousands of Iraqi Kurds just launched a ground offensive in Iran with former Special Envoy to Ukraine and Russia, Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. General, thanks for being with us here today. Let's start with the air. As the Secretary describes, it is complete control. He says, I hope you understand what that means. Can you help us understand what that means?
Sure, Will. Thanks for having me today. I really do appreciate it. Good to be with you. Look, the best way to describe that is air supremacy. And now they get to use weapons as an example. We've used a lot of precision standoff munitions where you fire them from a distance and they hit their target. Now we have unrestricted ability to bomb them directly overhead. So we can use our huge stockpile, what I would call as iron bombs, dumb bombs, on the targets that we want to use. So they have not been able to challenge us at all in the air. So generally you hear air superiority, we need to have that, but rarely do you hear the term air supremacy. That means you cannot be defeated in the air. There's nobody that can attack you or hit you in the air. There's probably a rogue air defense site out there, but they do the attacks with wild weasels or air suppression activities. And it basically means we can fly, we can do whatever we want with the type of munitions we want as well. What that allows you to do, it allows you to back off if you want it from your precision weapons, even though the vast majority are precision anyway, and move more towards dumb bombs or dumb equipment, the hard iron bombs without precision, and saves your stockpiles.
General, what about the news of the hour? This note that Iraqi Kurds have started a ground invasion into Iran.
Yeah, let people know this. This is really hard to do. When they talk about a ground incursion into Iran, Iran's a huge country. People don't realize how big it is. I do. When you take Iran, it's as big as Spain, France, the United Kingdom, and Germany combined. And when I was in the military, we obviously had war plans. One of them was Iran. And we know how hard it would be if you look at the geography. What I would hope they would do would really go take Karg Island. Karg Island is in the northern Persian Gulf. It is an island. It's offshore, about 18 miles. And if you take that island, that's 80 to 90% of the petroleum usage that the Iranians have. You basically shut them off economically. They cannot support China. They cannot support Russia as well. And sooner or later, the other side's going to realize this is just a bad news thing. So 10% right now, today, 10% of China's oil comes from Iran. When you had the 5% of their oil that came out of Venezuela, that's 15% cut in their economics and oil. So I would prefer they do something like that. I don't know how you get them across the island, but if you try to do a ground attack like they're doing, it's really at noise level because the country is so darn large, and they really can't make any impact. They're not going to march to Tehran. They don't have the combat power to do that. So it's kind of noise level right now.
Okay. We'll continue to monitor that. Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Good to be with you, Will. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.